A special report for a Friday night: the lies and deceptions of the second stimulus negotiations of Steve Mnuchin and Nancy Pelosi. Hey, good evening, everybody. This is LALATE with a special report on the second stimulus debate negotiations between Steve Mnuchin and Nancy Pelosi. For the first time ever, this channel is going to fact check and go behind the scenes on what has happened in the negotiations, how many times Steve Mnuchin or Nancy Pelosi have or have not been forthcoming with the status of your check and the second stimulus package. A lot of people have asked me what is my opinion on when you're going to get the second stimulus check. In fact, I've gotten that question overwhelmingly in the last 24 hours. And my answer has been, you're going to get it, but I'm getting a lot of mixed messages from people who are consistently inconsistent, namely Nancy Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin. So what's going on, and why can they not get their stories correct? Let me start first with Nancy Pelosi, who back in May introduced to the House of Representatives the HEALS Act, a bill which did not mirror the wishes or hopes of the American public. It called for a single stimulus check after Americans and Democrat voters wanted multiple stimulus checks. After Kamala Harris, who's now vice presidential running mate with Joe Biden, introduced a bill calling for multiple stimulus checks. And after other people like Elizabeth Warren and other leaders, both in the House and Senate, called for a different, more robust type of rental assistance. In that bill was a $1 trillion bailout for states. So the bill ultimately did not give multiple stimulus checks. And a lot of people were very perplexed at the time, including me. So why were we promised multiple stimulus checks by both Republicans and Democrats back in March? And we were told if you're on lockdown, you'll get a check for every single month. And why was the original version of the CARES Act call for a check for the month of March, April, May, June, and July? Because we knew then that this lockdown would be in place for at least a few months. But we only got one check. Because eventually the revision of the CARES Act, which Nancy Pelosi authored as well, took out those multiple checks. Who is the other person who wrote this CARES Act? If you don't know, the original CARES Act was also negotiated between Steve Mnuchin and Nancy Pelosi. Ultimately, Nancy Pelosi's bill was finalized by members of the House in May and landed in the Senate in May. And from there, Mitch McConnell said, dead on arrival, never going to see it, never going to pass. America's living off the federal government. I'm not going to see it. The American economy is great. Now, we understand Mitch McConnell is sort of like an ass that doesn't understand what's going on, that doesn't want to pay people money. But what the hell is Nancy Pelosi doing? The bill landed in the Senate, which does have some Democrats in it, and she didn't do anything to really woo any Republicans to support her bill. And she didn't try to get any Democrats in the Senate to get it to a vote or get it moving. Rather, nothing seemed to happen. And as I sit here tonight, I still don't know why her bill, which she likes so much, landed in the Senate and there was no progress by her members, by her Democratic members in the Senate since May. What also became very troubling was her bill called to give relief for things that are expiring, like FPUC, which had not yet expired, and mortgage forbearance and rental eviction moratoriums, which had not yet expired. And she knew they were expiring, but she didn't do anything to fix it when she saw her own bill wasn't getting traction. So why was she sitting back and blaming Mitch McConnell, but on her own regard not doing anything to fix several things that were expiring when she had a mega bill that wasn't getting a lot of mega support. Why didn't she make changes? Now, on the other side, the Republicans were much slower. The Republicans didn't introduce any bill in May whatsoever. They didn't introduce a bill in the month of June as well. Finally, I sat here with you as this channel grew to, over 100,000 subscribers in 1 month, asking where is the Republican second stimulus package. We were told that Steve Mnuchin and Mitch McConnell drafted it over several weeks and that they were going to introduce it on a Monday. First untrue statement. It wasn't introduced on a Monday. Then we were told Tuesday. Then we were told Wednesday. The whole week went on, and every half an hour we were told it was being introduced by that hour or that day by Steve Mnuchin. It wasn't. By the end of the week, reporters claimed that Steve Mnuchin and Mitch McConnell were at odds, that they could not see eye to eye. Steve Mnuchin said that they were not agreeing, but that it was a lot more dramatic than it was. So what really happened? The next morning, Saturday morning, Mitch McConnell went home to Kentucky, took a vacation with no stimulus package yet introduced by the Republicans, and Steve Mnuchin went to the Capitol steps and said he spoke to all Republican leaders and he had a consensus of an agreement for all Republican leaders to a stimulus package. We now know that statement was categorically untrue. One, because Republican leaders have now come out and said that they don't support what was eventually introduced, the HEALS Act. Two, it doesn't appear that his bill was ever introduced. Ultimately, it was introduced the next Monday, what was called the HEALS Act. And it mirrored exactly what Mitch McConnell asked for and mirrored nothing of what Steve Mnuchin and Donald Trump and his other cabinet members said they had put in the second stimulus package that Saturday and that Sunday on morning news. So when we saw the second stimulus package emerge from the Republicans on Monday introduced by Mitch McConnell, who's a senator, Steve Mnuchin's not a senator, we looked at it and we thought, this is not Steve Mnuchin's bill. This doesn't include rent eviction moratoriums, which Steve Mnuchin told news he has. This doesn't include this. We went all down the list. Everything was gone. Shortly, we learned that he did not have a bill, that this was Mitch McConnell's bill. So what's going on? Quickly, other Republicans saw problems. Mitt Romney, Marco Rubio, all these other Republicans started introducing their bills quickly because they saw this was a hot mess, and they called it a hot mess. As Steve Mnuchin tried to claim that he had unity among the Republicans, he absolutely had no unity among the Republicans. So, as chaos erupted, Nancy Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin started to meet. And when they said they started to meet, ultimately we were not told the truth about that as well. The negotiations were 2 hours in length. They were not hour-day-long negotiations that went on into the wee hours of the night. They were 2-hour meetings. Some described as very ineffective at all, much of a lot of bickering. Some described, as some sources said, it was very, very short and had just a lot of name-calling. Now, the big question was, why were these people in the room in the first place? Ultimately, a bill is decided by act of Congress. Why are congressmen not negotiating the bill? Before that negotiation started, I reported to you, well, we have the HEALS Act and we have the HEROES Act. They're going to go to congressional subcommittees, then they put them together, they negotiate them, they cut and paste, they argue, and they take them out, and then the senators vote on the things. And then it has to go both to the House and the Senate, whereas the Republicans had not been to the House, they would have to go back to the House. But the Democrats have been in the House, now they're in the Senate. Suddenly we're not doing that. Suddenly we have 4 people in a room deciding the fate of the American public, and not congressional leaders. Well, congressional leaders didn't like that. Whether it was Mitt Romney or Marco Rubio, they didn't like it. Suddenly, everyone started coming out, including Democrats, against Nancy Pelosi to say, what's going on here? Why are 4 people deciding the fate of the country and can't figure this out? But then the situation got worse. We were never given daily briefings about what were the dollar amount offers. We were never told exactly this amount was offered. What we were given were sources telling Washington Post, sources telling the New York Times, and in rare occurrences we had the president tweeting, and based upon your own inclination you can believe it whether it was true or not true. But ultimately, we immediately saw that Steve Mnuchin's offers were not the HEALS Act, were not the Republican proposal. So we had no paper backing up Steve Mnuchin's document we can look at and look at a Steve Mnuchin document and say, this is Steve Mnuchin's offer. We can see the document. We had no document. We still to this day have no document. So Steve Mnuchin said he introduced this offer and this offer and this offer, and Nancy Pelosi would ultimately come back and says, you didn't offer it. And the American public had no way to represent whether Steve Mnuchin ever offered these things because he has nothing in writing. He literally has nothing in writing. This entire White House during these negotiations over the next 2 weeks would put nothing in writing for the American public. At best, we would get a tweet from the president saying, some good news. On a Friday, I offered $400 a week for FPUC, but he wouldn't say how many weeks, he wouldn't say how long it was or whatever, but at least we had that a level of clarity, if at all. And days went on, and we had filtering of sources to Washington Post or New York Times or LA Times that said, okay, the parties agree upon, Nancy Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin agree upon this. They agree upon the second stimulus check. They agree upon the amount of the second stimulus check. They agree upon the dependents at $1,200. They agree upon the routing time of the stimulus check. They agree upon how fast you'll get the second stimulus check. There's no disagreement on hazard pay. They agree upon FPUC to December or January of next year. They agree upon FPUC to be somewhere between $300 to $600, which is not what Mitch McConnell introduced at $200. They agree upon rent eviction moratorium. They agree upon mortgage forbearance. They agree upon rental assistance. Pretty easy. It seems so simple. But again, these are sources. These weren't Steve Mnuchin and Nancy Pelosi inherently coming out and say, here was my dollar offer, $100 billion for rental assistance. Nancy, this is my offer. We didn't have that. So as Monday came this week, we had the biggest element of clarity because of really not Nancy Pelosi or Steve Mnuchin, but because of really two great reporters who I've always adored, but did a really good job in this interview, David Faber and Jim Cramer on CNBC Squawk Box. They had Steve Mnuchin on, and Steve Mnuchin says we had agreement upon a lot of things, but we don't have an agreement upon a $1 trillion bailout for states. Okay, pause. They followed up and they said, what did you agree upon each item? Give me the amount, give me the line item. Tell me exactly the amount she offered and what you offered and what it was. It was early in the morning. I was near the computer. I started typing because Steve Mnuchin was finally giving us the clarity of the numbers we had not had for this entire craziness of 2 weeks. So I start to type the numbers, and Steve Mnuchin says we offered this and she offered that, and we offered this and she offered that. Suddenly we had incredible clarity. And he left the interview leaving us understanding the following: that he agreed in principle with her on every subject matter except bailout to states, that every single amount of money of subject matter he agreed upon, he had a lower amount, she had a higher amount, and they met halfway. They split it, in his exact words. He made it very clear that she didn't offer PPP money. He asked for it, and she gave it. And he said we had an agreement, but it was killed because of a bailout for states, and then that was the rest of the interview. I ran that story all week long because that was the representation. Now, Nancy Pelosi clearly heard the interview, but didn't respond back. So the parties continued to negotiate, and again didn't tell us what was going on. Finally, they said on Friday or Thursday they're done for now. But why? She said he needed to come up with more money. What was the more money for? She issued a news statement that was brief. This was written about what her offers were and what his offers were. Again, it was only about 3 deal items. It didn't talk about anything I talked about with you just minutes ago. It talked about 1 or 2 or 3 deal items and kept on mentioning the following expression: American children going hungry, American children going hungry, American children going hungry. Well, there's more than just children that are going hungry. There's adults that are going hungry as well. And that was that. So we wondered, well, how about everything else? Finally, on Thursday, yesterday, she came out with a purple poster. And the purple poster only had 4 items on there, and it talked about rental assistance, it talked about food, and it talked about another thing. And I watched the poster, I looked at the poster, And immediately I looked at my notes. I said, wait a second. Steve Mnuchin said he had an agreement upon all these things on Monday. When he appeared with David Faber and Jim Cramer on CNBC, he said, I agreed to all these numbers. I have an agreement with her. And I looked at the numbers he told CNBC. Those are not the numbers that are on her chart. She said things like food. He offered nothing or next to nothing. He said he offered millions or billions of dollars. She said he was at $250,000. When, Nancy? Yesterday or 3 weeks ago? So at that point, we clearly started to see that someone is not telling us the truth, or maybe they both aren't. Tonight, it got even more strange, at least on the West Coast. On the East Coast, it was nighttime. On the West Coast, it was midday. When the president came out in a series of tweets and said that things were being held up by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. There's even a commercial he debuted for it as well. And yet there's some numbers in there, thank God. But, well, what did he say? He said that he had offered rental assistance, but the Democrats didn't want to have it. Wait a second. This is now the third version of the story. He said he had offered money to states to help states out. Wait a second. Steve Mnuchin on Monday said the deal fell apart because of Nancy Pelosi asking for a bailout for states. He said that he was offering money for hazard pay individuals, fire first responders and things like that, when Steve Mnuchin never had that in writing and has never mentioned hazard pay, and Nancy Pelosi has talked about it almost every other day, and it's in her bill. And then he said that your second stimulus checks are being ordered by act of my office to be sent out at $3,400. What? Viewers quickly started sending me DMs and tweets. What's this $3,400, LALATE? What's going on? What the hell is $3,400? Brand new calculation. $3,400 is $1,200 married couple, $2,400 married couple, and 2 dependent children, $500. Wait a second, who was talking about 4 children in this, 2 children in this negotiation? A family of 4? We're always talking about a family of 6. Nancy Pelosi and everyone else was talking about, and Steve Mnuchin was talking about a family of 6. 6 times 1,200 is, a family of 5. 5 times 1,200 is $6,000. We were always talking about a family of 5, $6,000. Suddenly we're at a family of 4? $3,400? What's going on? It follows last Saturday and last Friday as well, where the president said that the Democrats are not going to give you an eviction moratorium. The Democrats' proposal introduced an eviction moratorium. The Republicans' proposal did not introduce an eviction moratorium. It also came that day where the president said, I'm giving you FPUC because Nancy and Steve don't want to give you FPUC. Yeah, they do. They're offering you $600 a week. So he said he's offering you $400 a week. Well, the eventual bill didn't give you $400 a week. But 2 days later, Larry Kudlow came out and says $300 a week. His executive order didn't give you eviction moratorium. In fact, it gave you nothing. And as viewers continually remind us in the comments of this channel, the president only several weeks ago said that the Democrats are not doing a proper service to the American public. They're only giving you a $1,200 second stimulus check, as the president said. He said that's not sufficient. I'm going to give you a more generous check. Tonight, he's giving you $500. When did $500 become more generous than $1,200? It's become a strange microcosm of people telling strange tales. And it got even stranger this morning when the White House press secretary did what she said yesterday, and the same thing that Larry Kudlow said yesterday as well, which caused me to go like this, caused the CNBC reporter who was interviewing him to go like this. What? Where they said Nancy Pelosi is now holding up the negotiations based upon a voters' right initiative. A what? A who? A voters' right provision. Well, unlike the Republicans, Nancy Pelosi's bill is actually in writing, and we all went to the bill, and it's not in there. But, as others dropped in very educated comments today, allegedly, during several press conferences this week, other Republican leaders, including the president, have allegedly indicated that Nancy Pelosi has now slid that, allegedly, into the negotiations. A new provision worth, apparently, billions and billions of dollars that was not in her package, but has never admitted to it. So what's going on here? Ultimately, as a personal message, people ask me what I think is going to happen. And I really don't know because I can't get a straight story from anyone involved. You may think this is partisan, but it's not. A Republican and a Democrat cannot get their stories correct by the hour, let alone the day. That we have had no accounting of where the office has been, as one viewer had in a comment today, which is great. They should have their negotiations aired on live TV. I love that. Because we're not getting a clean story. We're not getting a clear story. Now, this is not to say you're not going to get your second stimulus check. I do believe you're going to get your second stimulus check. This is not to believe that there's not going to be a stimulus package deal. I do believe there's going to be a stimulus package deal. Finally, a personal message. My job is to report to you this mess, the hot mess express on a daily occurrence, or an hourly occurrence sometimes. Some viewers in the comments have, in the last 24 hours, who are not subscribers to this channel, they're not nice people, have said that I have predicted something to happen for one and I represented something for the other. No. You have to understand that when I'm reporting what people are saying. Steve Mnuchin 2 weeks ago said that the deal would be done by that Friday. Then the next week rolled around and he said there will be a deal by that Friday. He said that. He's on the record saying that. So I report the news that Steve Mnuchin says you're going to have a deal by this Friday and the checks will go out within 10 days. Then people come back, and some people who are not subscribers to this channel come back and say, you said there's going to be a deal last week and you said the checks would go out within 10 days of that deal. No, I reported to you what your cabinet member, who's the Treasury Secretary, reported to you. Ultimately, my job is to report the message, and sometimes the messenger's shocked with the message. But I want to make very clear, over the last 2 weeks, it's not been a clear message, whether it's Nancy Pelosi or Steve Mnuchin, whether it's Chuck Schumer or Donald Trump, whether it's Mark Meadows or anyone else involved, like Mitch McConnell, who 2 days ago said the deal has to be done, and the next day says the deal is a fiasco. It's sometimes a hot mess express in first gear, and sometimes it's a hot mess express in third gear. But ultimately, I'm here to report to you where the hot mess express is, and ultimately understand I'm not driving the hot mess express. It's the truck, it's the train that is operating currently in Washington. Thank you for joining me in a very eventful day coming up tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time is morning's LALATE. Go to the front of the button, in front of this channel, hit that subscribe button, and there's an alert button there as well. You'll get an alert when anything new comes live. As always, stay informed, stay smiling, stay motivated, and coming up tomorrow morning, LALATE mornings. Have a great evening.